September 25, 2023. This is the S&P 500 E-Futures Mini on the 2000 tick chart using the NinjaTrader 8 platform. You can look at my descriptions below to see where I actually took my trades as well as where I thought I saw setups. There was no real piece of economic data that came out today to really move the markets. As you can see, prices pretty much stayed within this gigantic trading range formed by the pre-market highs as well as the pre-market lows. I thought after the fact, though, a little bit later in the day, that there might have been kind of an upward slope, which is captured by this red trend channel. But as you can see, I didn't really find any good potential trades to take off of. I did take it into account on this trade over here. I took a total of 2 trades and I lost on both, which is unfortunate. Overall trading today, in my opinion, it wasn't very obvious. There were a few areas that I thought were traps, and so some of them it just set up very congested. And as you can see in the overall day, it looked like there's these nice big swings. But even though there's these nice big swings, I myself couldn't find a good setup to feel confident jumping in on. So unfortunately, I had to just, well, after I took 2 losses, there was a few more things that set up, but I just didn't trust them if I was still trading. So let's get into the charts right now, and I'll kind of describe the setups that I saw. So in the pre-market, it looked like there was no news that I could find to justify this gigantic sell-off right here. But this actually didn't happen very quickly. This happened at 1 a.m. Pacific Standard, and it ended at around 1:30. So it took about 30 minutes for this to sell off, but I wasn't trading at this time, and I looked back and I didn't really see a clean setup for you to know that this was even going to happen. So if you were able to jump on this trade and write it down, I would consider that probably just more luck than any particularly phenomenal skill. I did see this setup in the pre-market. I don't trade the pre-market though. This happened around 3 a.m. Pacific Standard, but it's just something I noticed when I was just reviewing the charts in the morning. There was a new low here, got a first entry short, it breaks up above the EMA and actually creates a second entry short here. But I saw this as probably a visual one push up. It breaks, it tries to test the highs, comes pretty much to it, and then makes a second attempt. And so here it completes the push and test of the highs. So I thought also per the count, this is a true second entry, but you have to discount this move here. You'd be first entry short, second entry short right here as a nice bullish bar. It closed above the EMA, but this is something I think might have been worth a trade. But it is in the pre-market, so I definitely just marked it and moved on. So keep in mind this red channel doesn't exist right now, but I did see this one leg down, breaks up, a second leg down. And so right as the market opens, you had already completed this move up and it tests the high already. So I'm thinking it had a breakout, test the high, and it might have a pullback. And at this point, this is what I see in real time. I'm thinking we're potentially in a trading range that could break out and start drifting downwards. So as prices are moving, I see this first setup. I see this as a new low here. I saw this first entry short, but then these happen so close together, I wanted to count these as just one low right here. So I've counted this as a new low. I said a first entry short, second entry short. This is a good signal bar for the second entry short, but okay, so this is a good setup for the second entry short. However, okay, I was kind of interrupted by a ping. So this is a new low here, localized, and I saw this as a new first entry short, second entry short. Also saw this as a new high, first entry long. It's riding right on the EMA. It looks like it's in this trading range. It's kind of in the middle of no man's land. It bounced off the EMA, but in this case, EMA just doesn't feel like there's any validity. There's nothing to really hang your hat on to believe it's a support or resistance. So even though I saw this kind of a setup and it created a second entry long here and the failed second entry short, I just didn't like this setup in general because it's not a good signal bar for the second entry long. It's near the top of the range now, especially after this subsequent bar close, confirming your second entry long, and there's no room to scalp. So although I saw this, I didn't think there was really anything worthwhile here. Then prices broke out, kind of starts falling into this upward green channel. And I saw this as one leg up. It consolidated and created a second leg up. And on my charts, if you just see these dashed lines, usually probably they're indicating where I thought I'm drawing out these measured moves. They're not part of a trend line. The prices keep going up. It falls to the top, or actually pushes to the top, and it comes back down. So I still haven't drawn this red channel yet. So actually, I'll just go ahead and remove it, move it to the bottom for now, just so it doesn't get confusing. Prices then continue chopping. It breaks out of this green channel. I'm just watching and waiting. There's kind of these really congested areas. Prices, when I start seeing this so early in the morning, where there's no real deliberate push one way or the other, I'm a little more cautious, thinking, okay, there's kind of a struggle going on. Both bulls and bears have no idea which way the market is actually going to go, so it's hard to ride up or ride down any particular trade. And if it doesn't really come back clean to a key entry point like the EMA or the bottom of a channel or range, then I'm more tempted to just kind of sit it out. And as you're going to see in a couple of trades coming up, that's kind of what I did. I missed out on some trades, but those are okay, in my opinion, to have missed just because for my experience level, it just wasn't clear enough. So it would have been, or at least not clear enough for my current level. Maybe if I've seen more chart time and seen more setups, I would have been able to identify them faster in real time. So I do see a new low here. It's a first entry short, comes up, and it creates this second entry short. Now I thought this was a possible trade. So I like the signal bar. It's very good. It's very bearish. It also just broke out of this orange channel. It broke out and it tested the new high. So I'm thinking it's starting an attempt down to move downwards now, because this is actually one leg down. However, I wasn't 100% sure on the strength or how true this yellow channel is, but I did mark it and I'm thinking it broke out. It probably wants to test this localized low. And so it made one push up, and I'm thinking it might be on its way back down. And there's enough room on this to test the EMA, but now here, there's not as much room. So that has given me pause. And it did form above the EMA for a second entry short. So I'm a little reluctant to short when it's above the EMA. Plus the EMA itself is flattening. So I had to just kind of wait on this setup, looking for a higher low, but it doesn't really form, excuse me, a lower high. So this is a lower high right here. It feels very far from the initial setup though. It confirms the second entry short. It's a good signal bar, admittedly, right? But since it's so far from the EMA, so far from this original setup, I wanted a touch and rejection off the EMA to feel more confident. And it did already come out, break out of this green channel, but didn't really close outside. So I'm unsure if this green channel has already tested its low. So to go short, you're saying that, well, I would be implying the belief that it's actually still trying to test this low, although I wasn't sure because it wasn't a very clean channel to begin with, to know that, hey, did it really break outside and it's going to come back and test? So I adjusted it here, but it kind of fits, but it still doesn't fit too clean. So that's just trade that I just kind of passed up. Then prices continue moving down. It chops around. I take this as my first trade. So I see this as a new low, obvious new low. It's a first entry short, pulls up, breaks through the EMA, and it creates a second entry short right here. Technically, this is the signal bar, and this is the confirmation of second entry short. But I noticed it's pretty far from the EMA. I wasn't ready to take a short. I saw this bounce off the EMA and fly right back up. So I'm thinking, okay, there's actually probably a long here. So when it double topped right here, I actually thought that this was going to be a worthwhile trade. I entered trying to get a little bit more safety, thinking the EMA is holding. I took it right at the tops of this double top. And I was thinking there's enough to scalp before I hit this new high. So as you can see, this is where my entry was. I was going to go long. It chops around, moves sideways. My stop is down here. I'm still surviving, but definitely here, I was kind of thinking I didn't read the chart right. And here you can see it stops me out by one tick. Then, as the market does, it traps me, stops me out by one tick, immediately reverses back up. And if I was still in the trade, had kept it this extra tick, then I would have probably gotten my scalp. However, to keep an extra tick would kind of go against the rules that I'm trying to follow, because what's to say next time I don't say I'm going to have 2 ticks of safety, 3 ticks of safety, 4 ticks, and eventually you just have a very big stop that ends up costing you a whole lot more than what you're trying to scalp for. So I had to follow the rules, take this one in the chin, and then move on. It's unfortunate though. Prices then continue moving down. chops around, and I kind of zoom out now. So I'm wondering, hey, is there a bigger channel in play? Because it looks like, so I'm trying to say, did I think this red channel was in play yet? I wasn't 100% sure yet. So it is coming up though. Then prices continue moving up. I didn't see a good clean setup. Technically, you have a new low here. You have your first entry short way up here. Too far from the EMA though. You have a second entry short here, but again, it's too far. You would not be thinking to go short, definitely. Prices then continue chopping up. It gets really, really ugly because prices and the candles are just kind of really congested. I will admit though, at this point, I did draw the bottom of this as a potential trend line support, but I wasn't 100% going to trust it yet because I only had really one touch confirmation. And I drew the top because it kind of fit nicely up here and fit nicely here. So I was thinking potentially there is a bigger channel price action was following. But as I said, it doesn't look firm enough to trust that there's an actual anything there to take trades off of. You need a whole lot more. If there are a lot of confirmations or a lot of key entry points, and this one just happened to also be there, then it's just an extra piece of information you can use to justify a trade. But I did see a new high here. You have first entry long, comes back down. I see a second entry long here. So the second entry long is actually where I take my second trade. And I also saw this as a potential fail breakout because I actually had my range up here. So I saw this as a second entry long fail breakout. Overall sentiment looks like it is kind of getting bullish. It made one leg up, pulls back. Now I'm looking for a second leg up to get to the top of this measured move. So that's my justification of what I was seeing in real time. I will admit this is a terrible signal bar for the second entry long, but I was banking off of the fact that this is also, you know, a potential fail breakout, and the EMA is the first kind of touch, even though it broke through. And so when it went back up and closed, right before it closed, I entered long right here, thinking there's enough room for a quick scalp. And as you can see, it chops around and then stops me out one tick below one tick below this guy, which is my stop. And unfortunately, that's my second loss of the day. And at that point, I just thought, okay, well, as you can see, going back, there weren't very many clean setups, and so I felt like I probably wasn't in tune with what was going on. And I looked back at it, I thought, okay, there's actually a bad signal bar. The subsequent bar, this guy is a bad signal bar. Subsequent bar, it kind of closed bullish, but way down here. And then this guy, when it closed bullish, that's when I thought, okay, obviously there's probably some kind of trade here. It's going above the EMA. EMA is flattening out though. And so I think in hindsight, after this ugly setup, because this is a second entry long here, there was no follow through. So this is an inside candle. So technically, this isn't a good second entry long setup because there's no tick above to give you momentum. And I think that in itself had invalidated the trade as a potential setup. So when I saw this, I shouldn't have entered here. Should have probably left it alone because it's showing me that the price action, there's indecision happening and the momentum to the upside, I think it's in question. So I should have skipped it, probably just left it alone. Plus prices before were pretty congested. So I was hanging my hat off of even this second entry long, which is just one tick. Technically, it's valid, but it is like showing there's so much indecision. So this is something I think I should have just skipped. Unfortunately, I took it and it got burned for it. And prices continue moving. And as you can see, if I actually had one tick below, again, it's there to fool me. It probably would have worked out, but it would go against the rules of the one tick safety stop because if suddenly to go two ticks, three ticks, four ticks, then you just kind of go down a slippery slope of having really large stop losses. And so in a way, it's good that I got stopped out, take the loss quickly and move on. And prices continue moving. I saw a new high here. It's a first entry long. I saw this setting up as a potential second entry long, but I had just recently took a loss. So I was keen to the idea that this one tick above is very similar to what was happening here. So I also drew this downward to here, thinking maybe this wasn't a failed breakout at the time, and it was just like a two-tiered trading range. So I saw this setup. I wasn't quite convinced that I liked it because this could be a failed breakout, or could it be a failed breakout pullback? So I don't know. So I had to kind of wait. I did know there was enough room for a quick scalp though. So I just had to wait to see if it's actually a failed breakout, comes back to the other side of the range, or breakout pullback. It kind of chops around. It looks like right here, it's a failed breakout coming back in, but then here it's kind of finding some support and it's moving back and it moves back out. So on a larger time frame, this looks like a failed breakout pullback. But to live through that and endure your trade, it looks like, it would have just been very choppy. And depending on where you kept your stop loss, you would have probably gotten stopped out. Then prices continue moving up. This is actually comes up to the next setup where I thought was a possible trade. So it comes up here. I see a new high. It's a first entry long, creates a second entry long. And here on the same candle, it creates the second entry long. It fails. It fails, but it closes right at the EMA. So what's happening is it's giving me pause. What I really wanted was this candle to close below, maybe very bearish, then I would have probably felt this is a worthwhile trade to take. It'd be a good failure. It's probably coming into, so I wasn't sure if there was a, let's see, let me zoom out. Remember, I had this red channel drawn and it was having some respect as resistance up here. So I was thinking, is there a potential failure to break out here? But since it closed right at the EMA and slightly above, I just wasn't sure. So I had to kind of sit on my hands and, not jump in if I was still trading, to take this trade. Then prices continue, breaks through. So this is a good confirmation. And now you're thinking, okay, maybe there's some pressure and traders jumping in to kind of push it back down. So this is kind of like a borderline trade. If I was more aggressive, I think this is a trade I might have taken. Then I see a lower high. So it comes up and I'm watching for the next candle to form. I want it to actually get close to the EMA, but stay below this guy. And it does. It forms and actually breaks below. So this is also a possible trade because it confirms the second entry long failure. The probably the only bad thing about it is the signal bar closed, you know, this is the signal bar closed bullish, but then the subsequent bar closed bearish, but it kind of made a double bottom. Had this actually ticked one tick below and I was still taking trades, I think this is a trade I might have taken. Plus, I did see this as a potential channel going down. This green channel as a third rejection. Looks like it would have worked. And so now it breaks out, chops around. I actually see another setup. It's the second entry short. So what I saw here, I felt like it was kind of a trap because here you have this green channel going down. You have an overshoot. And so when you have an overshoot, you think it's going to break out to the other side. But when it breaks out to the other side, my uh, my read of it was I was wondering if it was actually going to come back and test the lows here. But it already broke out of this downward green channel. So I'm questioning whether a situation like this that's about to set up, does it come back, have enough strength to test this, or does this already count as a new low from this green channel coming down? Because green channel coming down, technically it broke out, it already tested low. Would it have enough momentum to come back and test this low? So I wasn't sure. And it felt like it was kind of a trap that's being set up because this overshoot comes out. And as you can see, it comes down, makes a double bottom. It creates a very nice bullish bar, which is kind of the same as this guy. But the problem here is it flashes down and comes right back up. It felt like this is a little bit tricky. And it's indicating that, okay, it's not necessarily going to come back and test the lows because it made a double bottom right here. So then it flashes up hard. So you could say is a first entry short, second entry short, failure. When you see this, I don't know if you'd be really willing to take a long to consider and declare a failure just because it's below the EMA. If this actually closed a little bit higher, then it'd be no question a failure. But then when this candle forms and closes, this is definitely feels like it's too late to chase this trade. Look at the size of this candle. It's very bullish. You could argue that there's more momentum coming in to push it to at least get a scalp. But for something like this, I would be just very weary. I would want this to have actually at least broke above the EMA prior to this big green candle. And then prices continue moving up, goes into this orange channel, breaks down. And so at this point, it's very hard for me to know if this is in a larger trading range. So I was actually drawing this purple channel and I wasn't sure where the top of the purple channel was because it's actually here or here. So it was a little bit confusing because it's not making consistent lows and not making consistent highs. So it made picking the bottoms of the range and tops of the range a little bit difficult. So I see this setup happening again. It's breaking out, pops around, it breaks to the other side. So something's happening very similar to here. And so it created technically you could say it's a first entry short, second entry short, or if you're resetting the count here, it's a first entry short. It kind of breaks through. You do have a new high, first entry long, second entry long. It's a terrible signal bar. So this is just kind of making trading or the price action a little bit confusing. Goes up and comes back down. You do have a first entry long. You technically have a second entry long, but this is a terrible signal bar. Pops around. So if you just step back and you look at what's going on, this is just creating a sawtooth formation. Normally you would think, okay, there's good trades to be found, except the setups aren't very clean. The EMA isn't offering much help because it's just kind of getting, price action is just kind of chopping through it from both sides. So you don't have, you're already losing a potential key entry point indicator. And so you'd have to base it off of the highs and low of the range. However, the highs and low of the range is hard to tell because you have a new high, then you have a lower high, another lower high, and as you can see, another lower high here. Then on the reverse side, you think you have a consistent lows, but you're also making higher lows. So it's almost like it's wedging. It's kind of crushing in on itself, but then at that point, you don't know if it's going to break up or break down. So then I do see a new high here. It's the first entry long, second entry long. And I'm thinking this second entry long looks pretty weak. It's a good signal bar, but it closed below the EMA, which we've already decided that isn't very important. But still, you don't know if it's chopping through to the bottom or through to the top because you are not sure where you are in this very, very, I guess, weak looking trading range because it's hard to know where the consistent tops and bottoms are. But I marked this and I thought, okay, if there is a possible trade here, what has it got going for it? It has a good signal bar. So it's first entry long, second entry long, and it fails right here. Confirm failure here. So you have a good signal bar. It did close below the EMA, which we're arguing is kind of neutral or just kind of not as important, but it's still something you can hang your hat on. And the trigger bar, since it closed below the EMA, this guy, you do have a kind of rejection off this channel, 1, 2, 3. But here, even then, this channel doesn't look the most clean. So do you trust it or do you not trust it? I wouldn't know. So then it just, as you can see, it gets spiky and it just keeps going down. Pops through, comes back up, follows up this channel. It breaks out of this green channel, makes a new high, and it comes back down. So I'm thinking this up channel might have played out. And as we saw through history, it's making lower highs every time. But this time it actually made lower low, then higher low, and then finally a lower low. So I was thinking maybe it's actually going to come back down because the uptrend might have played out, but there's no setup here. You do get your first entry long, but that's not any setup that you want to be taking. Pops around. It's kind of getting close to the end of the day. I did see this, but it's too late in the day to take. It's a new high, first entry long, second entry long. It's a good signal bar. I like that it's bouncing off the EMA. EMA is acting as support again because it's starting to trend up. The major downside of this is there's not enough time to take trades before the close. So this would be very risky in my opinion because you'd only have 10 minutes to manage your trade. Granted, you could hold overnight, but that's always a dangerous proposition for trading the ES. So it was just marked because I wanted to mark it so I would see it and know about it. And as you can see, prices then kind of go into the close. So that's kind of how I saw the charts today. There wasn't very many trades offered. These two trades, probably the first one I thought was something that was reasonable until it actually played out. And then the second trade, I apologize. Actually, the second trade I think was one that I thought was a fail breakout, second entry long, and the first one, was probably not the best. And then this is a possible trade here that I think if I was still trading, I might have considered taking. So overall, it wasn't the easiest day for me. It was kind of tricky, and the price action was a little ugly. So hopefully that was helpful.